but you did remind us to, tell you that there's something more important than family. So what would that be?
Yeah. You know, it's hard. It's hard to say this, right? But I was just speaking to a friend of mine, Shakar Ahmed, who himself was in Guantanamo for 14 years. I remember I was only there for 3, but we were both very good friends, and we lived together in the same house in Afghanistan. Worked on the same projects together. He ended up in Guantanamo for 14 years. I was released for 3 years. I was a British citizen. He was not. That's the difference. He's here now. I was with him just yesterday. And there's something an American soldier, he said to me, would bring the soldier was crying when he told me this. The soldier had tears in his eyes. So he asked me if I knew this guy, Shaka. I said, yeah, he's my friend. And we were in separate cells. I never saw him again. I never saw him in Guantanamo. We were just in cells. He said, that guy's amazing. He said, um, he said, please, can you bring me a photograph? Because they didn't let him keep his photographs of his family in his cell. They were outside in a box. So he said, could you please just let me see the photograph of my kids? And his kids were similar to my age, very, really young. And this had been after close to a year and a half since he'd been in custody. He showed him the picture, showed the soldier the picture. There were a lot of good, decent soldiers, I have to say. There was lots of good American soldiers. So he showed this soldier, he said, look, these kids, these are my children. This is so-and-so, this is Abdullah, this is Johanna, this is Faris, so-and-so, etc. One of his children was born after he was in custody. So he never saw that kid until he was 15 years old, first time in his life. And his son and my son were born at the same time, but my son, Ayub, I saw him only when he was 3 years old. So you see the difference, right? So he looks at this picture and he says, these kids are more beloved to me than anything in my life. Then what the soldier said next is what brought tears to the soldier's eyes. He said, but I have to tell you something. There's something even more beloved to me than these children. And he said, that is me calling you to the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, this soldier was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, big, bulging muscles, probably a Christian. And the soldier understood the power of his words and what he meant, the depth of what he meant. That me calling you to the deen of Islam is more beloved to me than these children who I love more than my life itself. And the other part of this greater story, there are many soldiers in Guantanamo who took the Shahada. Some in Guantanamo, some outside, black, white, Hispanic, male, female. We can talk about that if there's time. But it was important that I get this out to you guys, because I don't often talk about those details. Sometimes people just want to hear about, what happened in the story, but there's so many layers, so many parts of it. And when I'm speaking to young brothers like you, I like to get those parts out rather than to just tell a story chronologically. So yeah, it was that thing, more beloved than your most beloved children, that people would give their lives for.
Mm.
Wow.
SubhanAllah, this might be a side question, but I'm wondering when you do a lot of these podcasts and interviews, why do these nuances not come up most of the time? Is it because people just want to prioritize like what happened and that's what usually gets clicks and views, or what is it?
It depends who you're speaking to, right? So now I'm speaking to a lot of media. I've just been speaking to the BBC today. They don't care about that stuff. They don't care. They don't care about it at all, right? So it depends who, and that's why when I speak to guys like you, who I know you have a different take on things, and you're doing it for a different reason, I find it important to bring these things out. And it just because there's so much over this period of time, like there's so much has happened, and certain people, like I'm looking at your faces, you're triggering those responses within me right as I speak. If I was speaking to somebody else, probably I'd be talking about a different aspect. So this all has to do with a reflection. Al-mu'minu mira akhi, that the Prophet said that the believer is the mirror of his brother.
SubhanAllah. SubhanAllah. So, in regards to this soldier, you said that part really touched him. Hearing that from the brother really touched him. Did that soldier end up accepting Islam?
I don't know. I don't know if he did, but I just remember that he's the one who told me. That soldier is the one that told me the story. Right?
Yes.
I wouldn't have. He's the one who told me. See, Shakir is my friend, but Shakir never told me that story ever. He's never told me that story even since he's returned. But you see, you learn things about other people, sometimes about your closest friends that you never even hear from them.
Wow.
And I'll tell you another story now that we're at it. Shakir once, and this is really, when I heard this again, I started to cry because I was imagining him. I'd not seen him since we lived together. I just heard he's in custody. And I was in interrogation. And this was very brutal in Kandahar. They'd stripped us naked, they'd beaten us, they'd tortured us, they'd ripped off our clothes, they'd spat upon us, they brought dogs to salivate over us and taken photographs of us. And Shakir, he's got beautiful, long, lovely hair and beard, and they shaved it all off like a sheep. and they did the same to me and to everybody. And in this, when I'm in an orange jumpsuit, I'm hands behind my back, I'm soldiers pushing me down, shouting, screaming, cursing, in the middle of this place that they built just by Kandahar airport. It's freezing cold, and they, you hear the sound of the gun being cocked, and it's right against your head and against your back, and all of that. The attempt to terrify you. Now, a soldier, I'm on my knees here, and a soldier says to me, "Hey, do you know Shakir? Do you know Shakir Amar?" I said, "Yeah, he's my friend." He said, "That guy was just in here before you." And I'd heard that he'd been taken in custody, but I didn't know. And he said, "That guy's, I don't know what to say about that guy." I said, "Why?" He said, "Because he's here kneeling here with his hands cuffed and his legs cuffed, and we're standing here, interrogating everybody here, and he's telling me about Islam. He's telling me about becoming a Muslim. He's telling me about what this religion is about. He's telling me how you've got it all wrong, that this faith isn't about death and destruction. It's about life and preservation. It's about worshipping and giving that duty of worship, the due rights to the one who created you. And you as an American, you understand that more than a lot of people in Europe. So I don't want you to get it wrong." And Shakir told me this. I asked him about it yesterday. I said, "Why did you do this?" He said, "Because I lived in America before this happened. And I know," this is what he says, and it's shocking to hear this, "I know American people are not bad people, generally." This is a guy who's been imprisoned and tortured for 14 years. He said, "But there is a great deal of ignorance. And the antidote to ignorance is knowledge. So for the first many years, I tried to, even in the hardest of circumstances, say that I'm going to give them knowledge." Even though he was also the leader of the protests and the hunger strikes in Guantanamo, he said, "For the first several years, just I'm going to give them dawah. That's it."
SubhanAllah.
And personally, I'd rather speak to you about these things than just about my boring old story. Well, it's not boring for some people, but this happened and this happened chronologically, because these are the gems, really, honestly, that get missed out. And so I'm glad they're coming out, inshallah, now.
Yeah, subhanallah. I'm currently I was in a placement at a hospital for a couple months, and I used to go back and forth. It's like a 1 hour drive, right? So it was like 2 hours every single day. And I remember for a good moment in time when we were arranging this interview with you, I was just listening to a bunch of podcasts that you were in, and I've never heard these stories because all of the stories that I used to hear on those commutes were like, what actually happened, different accounts. The lady that you mentioned that hit you up on Facebook, she was a Guantanamo I believe, guard, and she took her shahada, alhamdulillah. And these were the stories that we never heard, the ones that you're talking about. I think there's another thing too. It's the perseverance aspect too. Like we're more willing to stick through with things that we set out with an intention.
It's impossible to have empathy for others if you're not patient. So may Allah bless you for that.
First off, I'm gonna agree with the fact that the whole thing you said about friends, where it's like if they're affecting you more than you're affecting them, then you should probably get some new friends.
You want to be investing, stocks, shares, bonds. You want to be investing in crypto because there's this thing called inflation, which means every year that passes by, the value of a dollar goes lower and lower and lower. And the reason being is because they're printing more money, right? That's why money is haram. At least the paper money is haram.
Provided that you're actually there and you're being a good father and the mother's being a good mother, best conditions.
And behind the mic, Hamza, Andreas, Zortsis, we will go in with our final three with brother Angel, inshallah.
Inshallah, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
It's not just a responsibility on you, it's responsibility on all the children, especially your father.
In our private area is very elastic, and yeah, if you go too fast, the skin will literally crease up into like the edge of like the little clipper things, and you will literally clip your skin. You don't want to be on YouTube or the internet or anything that amount of time, but it's the fact is that's what we're doing.